All right, I've got my most Elvis outfit on. Let's talk about the sequel to the Austin Butler Elvis film, Priscilla. Hey everyone, it's David Stark from Watch or Pass. I'm here to talk to you about Priscilla, which is coming to theaters nationwide on November 3rd, 2023. Now look, I know this is not the sequel to the Austin Butler film, but it's interesting that, Austin Butler's Elvis came out. It was very well reviewed. Priscilla is coming out. I imagine it'll probably be pretty well reviewed. My hot take is, I think you should watch it. I was kind of between a watch and a rent, but it is a really, really well-made film. It is a really well put together film. It tells an emotional story, has some really great performances, some nice music, and it does a really, really good job of kind of telling this like careful line in Priscilla Presley's life between, the things that seem like sweet and then kind of move into abusive very quickly. It is an interesting kind of like dynamic that the two of them had. The only things I didn't really love is the film is pretty slow and there are some weird cuts. It's almost like there are like independent scenes that happen and then they move on. It feels like this could have maybe had a little bit smoother editing process. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but look, overall, it is a well-made film. It tells an emotional story, and it tells a really interesting story. So I'm going to tell you a little more about the film. A few things I like, a few things I didn't like. Look, it's based on a true story. I'm not really going to go into like spoilers or the ending because this is about Priscilla's life. It's based on a book, so you kind of probably already know what happened, or at least you can find out pretty easily. But I'm just going to talk about the film. It'll be spoiler free, so don't worry too much. There might be a few little like instances of things that happen when I'm explaining things, but overall, I'll keep it vague and I'll keep it spoiler free. So Priscilla, as you would imagine, follows Priscilla Presley and her and Elvis's kind of like strange romance, the way that they met, their early courtship, how she kind of came into his life, and then it follows their marriage through ups and downs, through the birth of their child, and then as they both changed very drastically, very, very different people, and kind of how Priscilla's life was contrasted with Elvis's life. It was a really, really fantastic job on all of this, and it leads to some very kind of interesting, painful, and emotional scenes. So, things I liked about this movie. The first, hey, look, the music. It's a movie about Elvis. Of course, I'm going to like the music, and the music is fantastic. There are some Elvis songs, but there's also some really good, just kind of like classic rock, either classic rock sounds or classic rock sounding sounds that really help to kind of frame the time period. This takes place in the 50s and the 60s. You have a very different kind of world then, and the music does a really good job of like helping to build that and give you that kind of sense of what was happening at the time. The second thing I loved about this movie is, I'm going to call it the power dynamic. I mean, as you would imagine, Elvis Presley dating Priscilla Beaulieu, who she's a 14-year-old kid. She is in high school. She's a freshman in high school. She is going on to school on this military base. He is a superstar that everyone knows. She is a relative unknown. Their power dynamic, as you imagine, is very, very, very different. And the film does a really good job. I imagine, it tries to tell this accurately, and I think it does, of showing just how different, they were. Like, she is kind of brought into his life. And as you'd imagine, they have very different negotiating positions in this life. And the film doesn't just do this with situations. It just does it with the way it shows the movie. And I think that, this is probably accurate, but it's a really striking scene when they first meet. And Elvis is this like tall superstar who like towers over Priscilla. And Priscilla is this essentially like kid, she acts more mature than she is, but she's essentially a kid meeting this superstar. You can tell just from the way that their body language is and the way that they are positioned that this is going to be a very different power dynamic between the two. And the film focuses a lot on that and how Priscilla has to navigate this power dynamic and try to kind of assert herself while also understanding some of Elvis's quirks and things like that. It does a fantastic job of telling this throughout the film. The third thing I love, I'm going to call it like the razor thin line. I think this movie does a really, really good job of showing, what you would consider an abusive relationship, but showing kind of the weird, like, gray area that it encountered. There are some scenes that seem amazingly sweet, amazingly genuine, and then it'll change slightly, like something Elvis says will cause it to become, more of an abusive power dynamic, or, something Elvis does will be out of left field and be very abusive. And the film does a really good job of showing enough, like, sweet, loving scenes to kind of balance the two, like, to kind of show how one could be swept up in this relationship and how one could, like, stay with Elvis, think that he really like loves her, think that he really cares for her, despite some of the things that he does throughout their relationship. The fourth thing I love the lighting. It is a really, really good job with the lighting, and it's a very kind of important point to this. There are scenes where, like, on the military base in Priscilla's regular life, it is drab, it is, not colorful, isn't bright, it's not popping. She goes to visit Elvis in Memphis. It's beautiful. It's bright. The house is gorgeous. Like, it is a really, really good job of kind of like highlighting the differences between the lives and using the lighting to show like one being obviously much more exciting, much more kind of fantasy-like, and the other being much more drab and boring. There's another really good scene towards the end where there is a kind of confrontation that happens, and it's all like red lighting. It's at night, and then later, after something is resolved, the lighting has changed. I mean, obviously the time has changed, but they did a really good job of showing the scene later where it's like the morning, and the like sunlight is streaming in, and it just kind of elevates that whole process and shows like, okay, now this is resolved. And I really love how the lighting became its own element to the storytelling. And the last thing I love the performances. I thought they were really good. Both the main characters, Cailee Spaeny and Jacob Elordi, do a fantastic job. I think Cailee Spaeny does a really, really good job with Priscilla. Like, she comes off as, to play into, to kind of showcase the power dynamic. She always comes off as like a little bit meeker, a little bit kind of more uncertain, because she is, not part of this world. She is kind of coming in. She wants Elvis's favor. I thought that she did a really fantastic job of that. And then as her character grows, she also grows and changes. And it's really fascinating. Like, her character at the end is very, very, very different from her character at the beginning. Like, looks different, acts different, talks differently. It is such a wonderful like growth story for her, and just kind of the way that she grows her character throughout is really, really good. And Jacob Elordi does a really good job as Elvis. Like, he embodies Elvis as far as I can tell. Look, I'm not like an Elvis scholar, but he passes the part. He has the look, he has the hair, he has the moves in some scenes. He does a good job of like showcasing one of the most well-known people and kind of doing a really good job performing it. I don't know if he's as good as Austin Butler was, but hey, you know what? He's an important part of this story. It's really good that Jacob Elordi rises to the occasion. So that being said, things I didn't love as much. The film is slow. Like, unlike me talking, and I always talk fast, apologies, the film itself is very, very slow. It feels slow and it feels very deliberate, which can be good, but it also made for a film that, I don't know, felt a little bit too long. It's interesting. Like there are some really beautiful scenes, some really interesting, exciting scenes, but there's a lot of like very slow development scenes, and they're important. They are very important to the story to show kind of like the contrast in Priscilla's life and the differences between Elvis's life and her life. But that leads to some very, very slow sequences in the film that make it not as interesting as I was kind of hoping it would be. And it has a similar feel to Spencer, the Princess Diana movie with Kristen Stewart. But I don't know, for Spencer, I was just so enthralled by her character and so enthralled by like the interesting things that were happening. I didn't mind the slowness. This one, I definitely was looking at my watch partway through. I was definitely looking at my watch a few times. That's not to say I didn't like the movie, but it definitely feels like a little bit of a slog at times. And the last thing I didn't love as much, I'm going to call it the cuts, maybe the editing. I'm not 100% sure, but there were some scenes that almost felt like one-off scenes. Like, it would be almost like a situation shot where like something will happen. There is this blow up or there is this emotional moment, and then it just kind of ends. And we're on the next scene. And it's weird. It feels like you needed like a little bit more time, maybe a little bit more kind of resolution, not just kind of like cut off and go. And it happened a few times. It almost felt like these were like set pieces that the film was trying to show. And I don't know if maybe they had longer scenes and they edited it down to get into a kind of reasonable runtime for a movie. It's 113 minutes long. It's already a fairly long movie. I don't know if they could have pushed it to 215. That might have been too much. But it really does feel like there's some of these like just kind of chunk scenes that needed to have a little bit more, I don't know, connective tissue or a little bit more kind of like resolution at the end. So all that being said, Priscilla is a really good movie. It tells an interesting story, a story about someone that, I don't know, I didn't know much about Priscilla Presley, and I feel like I know a lot more about her now because of this, and I also really liked the overall movie. So that is Priscilla. It's coming to theaters on November 3rd, 2023. Definitely check it out. It's probably going to be up for some sort of awards later on this year, so you're going to want to see it early so you can be ready for award season. So thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.